Week 17 is officially here, and we are in championship week of your fantasy football leagues. There's no next week. There's no week after. All the blood, sweat, and tears you have put into your fantasy football teams across the last 4 months is on the line this week. We are talking win or go home. We're talking the final 2 teams left in your league. And the difference between making the right or wrong call could end up being the difference between you hosting the trophy or leaving in second place. So today I will be focusing on helping you guys make those correct decisions. Going through my top 36 wide receiver rankings, going through the cases for each of these guys to help you determine which guys will make your lineup. Again, if you guys do enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. This is the single most important rankings video of the year because we want you guys hosting that gold, because we want you guys going into the comments and telling us about how you hoisted that trophy in your leagues. But we're going to start off with the will they play tier along with some of the guys already ruled out. We will start with CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Has been shut down for the year, has been placed on IR by the Dallas Cowboys. He was dealing with that AC joint sprain since that Falcons game, I believe, in week 7. It is unfortunate that they decided to do this, of course, at the timing that they did. But if you did have CeeDee Lamb, unfortunately, you will be without him for championship week. Along with Christian Watson, again, he hasn't officially been ruled out yet, but he has not practiced all week, coming off of that knee injury he suffered against the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football. It is looking doubtful at this point that he will be playing. Matt LaFleur even said that hopefully we get some more progress for him this week, and he has not returned to practice yet. So if you do have Christian Watson, be prepared to be without him this week. Again, technically, he has not officially been ruled out, but I will put him in the out section because at this point, I see a hard time for him being able to play. Moving on to the will they play guys, again, a little bit more murky situations. We don't really have the full information as to their status as of right now, but with Davante Adams as the number 1 option here, did not practice in both Wednesday and Thursday practice. Monitor his status on Friday and Saturday. Again, maybe it's a veteran situation. He didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Maybe he does return to practice on Friday by the time you're watching this. So keep tabs on the situation. If Davante Adams plays, top 12 wide receiver in my rankings this week. Same thing goes for Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. He did return in limited capacity on Thursday with that reported ankle injury. So monitor his status again. Friday, Saturday, if he does maybe even upgrade to a full practice, we do feel more confident about his playing status on Sunday Night Football. Malik Neighbors himself said he's a game time decision for this game, obviously dealing with that toe injury. Monitor his status, of course, like I said, if he returns on Friday, if he returns on Saturday, we feel more confident in him playing in this game. But for him himself to say he's a game time decision, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers dealing with a hamstring injury. You guys do recall earlier in the year, missed 2 months with a hamstring strain. So definitely something to monitor. Older wide receiver, whether it's the same injury or not, whether it's the same hamstring or not, we are going to be extremely cautious with Adam Thielen. If you do have him, even if he is ruled into this game, I would lean towards a different option, considering the risk level of an older wide receiver re-injuring the hamstring. Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns has been dealing with a knee injury these last few weeks, but we have also seen a shin issue flare up as of this week. He does play in the 4 p.m. slate on Sunday, so make sure you do have a pivot option if you have Jerry Jeudy. If he does play, he's a fringe top 35 level option for me. And the same goes for Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. He did miss last week's game with the knee injury, but he returned to practice in limited capacity on Thursday. Again, extended absence, wide receiver that's been volatile all year. If you have better options, make sure you put them in. But for Jalen Waddle, if he does play, fringe top 36, top 40-ish level option in my rankings. Now we move on to my top 12 wide receivers. Starting off with my wide receivers 1 and 12 respectively, we have the Cincinnati Bengals duo of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, both going up to play the Denver Broncos at home this week. 26.5 implied Bengals points at home. We'll start off with Jamar Chase. I mean, he's been in a tier of his own all year. We got a matchup now with Denver where he is not expected to be shadowed by Patrick Surtain in this game. And with Jamar Chase, I mean, it's pretty simple. 24 PPR points per game, currently pacing the NFL for the Triple Crown. There's no wide receiver this year that is on the level of Jamar Chase. Highest in terms of touchdowns, highest in terms of receptions, highest in terms of receiving yards. Anyone out there who isn't ranking Jamar Chase at 1 is doing you a disservice this week. And for T. Higgins, I mean, he's also been very good in his own right. 17.3 PPR points per game this year. And while there is some concern that he could be shadowed by Pat Surtain in this game, I trust this Bengals offense, and I trust T. Higgins himself the way he has been playing all year. Next up at wide receiver 2 was actually Nico Collins of the Houston Texans. Very unfortunate game on Christmas. I mean, I don't even think this was Nico Collins' fault in his own right. I mean, he was getting open. He was separating downfield, but CJ Stroud, man, the fall from grace that we have seen from year 1 to 2 has to be studied. Now, obviously, there is context. Line has been playing as well. You do lose Diggs. You do lose Dell. But CJ Stroud needs to figure it out moving forward. That was one of the strengths I cited for Nico Collins coming into the year, but unfortunately, when you needed him most in a good matchup, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 59 receiving yards, only 8.9 PPR points. Next up at wide receiver 3 is Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings, 25.25 implied Vikings points at home against their divisional rival Packers. And with Justin Jefferson, I mean, this is a smash game environment for the overall wide receiver 2 in fantasy. 5 touchdowns in his last 3 games, 19.5 PPR points per game this year, and he has been on a tear as of late with 20 plus PPR points in each of his last 3 games. Obviously, we know with the Packers, Jair Alexander has missed some extended absence, is expected to be out in this game as well, and Justin Jefferson is spearheading one of the hottest offenses in the entire league. With Sam Darnold, 15 touchdowns in his last 6 starts, like I said, over 25 implied points at home. Jefferson has a smash environment to get you guys that gold. Next up at 4, we got Puka Nacua of the LA Rams playing on Saturday night against his divisional rival Cardinals. Rams hosting the Cardinals, like I said, Saturday night football game. And with Puka Nacua, he has been on a tear since week 10. Over 22 PPR points per game in that stretch. And we will add some more context once we get to the Cooper Kupp bit. But with Puka Nacua, he has been so situation-proof for this offense. Whether Stafford is playing well, whether Stafford is struggling, we have seen Puka Nacua be that clear first read for this team. He's got the elite volume. He's got that elite ceiling, and he has shown an insanely high floor as of late. And with Arizona, again, they are tougher against opposing wide receivers this year, but anyone who can command a consistent 30+% target share needs to be ranked as a top 5 option. Next up at wide receiver 5 for me this week is Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions, 27 implied Lions points on Monday Night Football with the Detroit Lions traveling to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, Jared Goff's been on a roll, and since David Montgomery went down with that knee injury, we have seen the Lions throwing the ball a lot more as of late. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, each of the last 2 weeks, top 12 overall wide receiver in fantasy, and he is the current wide receiver 3 overall on the season. Yeah, sure, San Francisco, they are a run funnel defense on paper and are currently a bottom 2 matchup for wide receivers, but with Amon-Ra St. Brown, that slot usage, Ben Johnson scheming him touches in open space, he is one of the safest wide receiver projections on a week-to-week basis. Next up at 6, we have Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the divisional rival Carolina Panthers this week. 28.75 implied Bucs points at home. And with Mike Evans, he is currently 182 yards off of 1,000. Now has a prime matchup against Carolina to bounce back after that slow showing on Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys last week. With Evans, like I said, down game versus Dallas, but we've seen his ceiling since his return in week 12. Since that stretch, 19.5 PPR points per game, 27% target share. And like I said, with such a high implied total, with the touchdown equity he brings to the table, there are a few wide receivers I would rather have than Mike Evans in championship week. And speaking of being on a roll, I mean, wide receiver 7 is Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars hosting the Tennessee Titans at home this week. 21 implied Jaguars points, and BTJ has been an absolute league winner down the stretch. We're talking about a guy in his last 4 games, 10 plus targets in each game. And in those 4 games, 24 PPR points per game, including 2 30-plus point outings. Yeah, sure, a little bit more risky with Mac Jones as the starter rather than Trevor Lawrence. But the way Brian Thomas Jr. has been playing, the level of involvement, 49 targets in those 4 games, he's so easy to trust. You got the usage, you got the elite talent, you got the big play upside. I'd make the case at this point that Brian Thomas Jr. may very well already be a top 10 NFL wide receiver. In my opinion, with CeeDee Lamb going on the mend, I think he is going to end up being an all-pro as a rookie. So that just goes to show you, I mean, BTJ has that level of talent. To me, he looks like Nico Collins out there. And you guys know my thoughts on Nico Collins. And in this smash spot against Tennessee, where Tennessee just allowed 38 points to the Colts last week, I think Brian Thomas Jr. can take you over the top. Wide receiver 8 for me this week, who actually already played on Thursday Night Football, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Rough game, not going to sugarcoat it. 6 targets, 3 receptions, 32 receiving yards, 6.2 PPR points. It is unfortunate. He was a baller across the whole second half of the year, but if you relied upon him in championship week, he came up with a dud. Wide receiver 9 for me this week is Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. 21.75 implied Falcons points at home, Sunday Night Football against the Washington Commanders. He was listed as questionable coming into the week, but it does look like he will be taken off the injury report. He already said himself he is ready to go on week 17. So with Drake London, I mean, we know he is an alpha level target earner, and we know with Michael Penix coming in, sure, was it the greatest box score for Michael Penix in game 1? Not necessarily, but what we saw from Kirk Cousins, the deterioration of him as a player, the struggles that he had at the end of the stretch, I can confidently say that Michael Penix is going to be an upgrade for Drake London this week. And like I said, 27% of the targets for a Falcons offense that is playing for their playoff lives, Not many wide receivers I'd rather trust than Drake London this week. And wide receiver 10 is where I end up with A.J. Brown this week. We got the Philadelphia Eagles hosting my beloved Dallas Cowboys. And it's such a weird situation because on one hand, I mean, it's a prime matchup for one of the elite wide receivers in the league. But on the other hand, I mean, we're talking about a situation that Jalen Hurts hasn't practiced all week. The team's already preparing to be starting Kenny Pickett against Dallas, and I'm a little bit concerned with that. Now, for what it's worth, we have seen 48.7 PPR points across the last 2 games for A.J. Brown ever since he called out the team's passing game. But we got Kenny Pickett dealing with that rib injury, not fully 100%. And there could very well be a situation where we just see Saquon Barkley run wild against Dallas. That is the worry for A.J. Brown. Again, he's too elite of a talent to fade outside of the top 10, but just understand this could be one of the lower range of outcome games for A.J. Brown, given that there will be no Hurts. And then wide receiver 11 for me, closing off the wide receiver ones, as we already talked about wide receiver 12 T. Higgins earlier on. We have Ladd McConkey of the LA Chargers, 23.25 implied Chargers points on the road against New England this week. And with Ladd McConkey, since week 8, he's been averaging 16.6 PPR points per game. And as we know, great offensive situation for the Chargers, over 23 implied points on the road. And Ladd McConkey is the definition of the alpha on this team. 25% target share, tethered to Justin Herbert. Again, the Chargers wide receivers outside of Ladd McConkey have struggled all year, and Ladd has been the lone bright spot in that offense. And with Gus Edwards expected out, J.K. Dobbins being banged up, I expect them to lean on the pass game with Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert taking them over the top. You guys knew to start these guys like I mentioned at the top, so now let's spend some more time in the wide receivers 13 to 36 area. But before I do, if you guys want access to all of our weekly rankings this week, they are actually free. If you guys go over to the description of this video, our weekly rankings manifesto will be made free for you guys. We want you guys coming over with those fantasy football championships. We want you guys commenting in the comments. Your rankings helped us secure the chips. So this week, our entire set of rankings will be free for you guys. That's our thank you for your guys' support across the full season. But if you guys do want to support us this offseason, check out flockfantasy.com, promo code FSC. And if you guys do sign up with promo code FSC, you'll get 30% off any site-wide package as well as a 7-day free trial. Again, if you guys are Dynasty sickos, you will have access to all of our content we're planning this offseason. Rookie rankings, all of our Dynasty rankings, all the videos that we have planned over on the Flock Fantasy site. If you guys have been on the site before, you'll know exactly what we're referring to. But man, if you guys are a Dynasty sicko, flockfantasy.com is the #1 resource to bettering your game. But on to the high-end wide receiver 2s. We start off with Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos, 23.5 implied Broncos points on the road against Cincinnati this week. And Courtland Sutton, yes, he did have a rough week 16. There's no sugarcoating it. However, this is a big-time bounce-back spot against a struggling Bengals defense. 7th easiest matchup for wide receivers this year. And prior to last week, Courtland Sutton had 7 straight games of 8+ targets. And I do think Courtland Sutton gets back on track this week. Second highest over under the slate, and this is the type of game environment we want pieces of. Wide receiver 14 is Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football against the Detroit Lions this week. 23.5 implied Niners points at home, and he had his full bounce back in week 16. Now, of course, smash game environment, high over-under going up against the Detroit Lions. And Purdy really got back on track this past week with Deebo Samuel obviously both making plays through the air and on the ground. 9 targets, 5 carries this past week. And I think we should continue to see backfield touches with Isaac Guerrero and Patrick Taylor being banged up. And wide receiver 15 for me actually already played on Thursday Night Football, unfortunately, like JSN. Keenan Allen, not a very good game. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 25 receiving yards, 7.5 PPR points going up against Seattle. Again, it was a 6-3 slugfest, a little bit of rain there. It's unfortunate if you had either of these guys, but we did see both offenses struggle mightily on Thursday night. Wide receiver 16 for me is Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, the big-time revenge game going up against his former team with Jacksonville. And we saw in the last matchup against Jacksonville, Calvin Ridley commanded 12 targets in that game. And I do think he has the opportunity to match that type of volume output with maybe some more consistent production with Mason Rudolph starting this week. As we know with Will Levis, had a big-time ceiling, but unfortunately the volatility he brought from a play-to-play, game-to-game standpoint won't be missed with this offense. Mason Rudolph providing a little bit more stability. Again, we have seen more consistency with Calvin Ridley when Mason Rudolph is the starter, and I really do feel like despite this being a low over-under game, we see these offenses come to play. Jaguars, Titans, both defenses have struggled as of late. And like I said, I think both offenses will find their way. Wide receiver 17 for me this week is Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. 18.5 implied Jets points on the road to face the Buffalo Bills this week. And with Garrett Wilson, he hasn't played up to the expectation myself and Corey had for him in the offseason. However, we did see him call out the lack of targets this past week, and head coach Jeff Ulbrich actually addressed the issue. As you guys can see from this quote, Wilson's frustration is nothing new. Last week, he was asked if he would like to remain with the Jets long term, but was non-committal, further fueling trade rumors. And this is actually a quote from Jeff Ulbrich himself. Gotta just keep manufacturing looks and touches and get targets for him and putting him first in progression as often as we can and finding ways to get him open and get him the ball in space. That's exactly what we want to hear. Similar situation last time we saw a wide receiver call out his lack of usage. A.J. Brown had 2 straight 20-plus point weeks. So, again, Garrett Wilson is not A.J. Brown, but we also have the possibility if Devontae Adams does suit up, that wide receiver 17 is too low for Garrett Wilson in the rankings. I found that wide receiver 17 is the sweet spot for him this week, and I actually do think he gets back on track. But my wide receiver 18 actually already played on Christmas as well. Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. This was the Derrick Henry show. We also saw Lamar Jackson get active on the ground, thus resulting in an overall low passing volume day for the Baltimore Ravens. Zay Flowers, 5 targets, 2 receptions, 31 receiving yards, only 5.1 PPR points. Very unfortunate if you did start him this week in fantasy. But moving on to my low-end wide receiver 2s, my wide receiver 19 this week is Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, I already talked about his teammate with Justin Jefferson, but Jordan Addison himself has been playing some very good ball as of late. 17.9 PPR points per game, 23% target share since week 9. And obviously, like I said, the Vikings-Packers game is poised for a ton of points to be put up in this game. The Vikings offense, like I said with Sam Darnold, been playing on fire, been looking like one of the best units in the NFL. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell calling the shots, and they have a potential bye-week opportunity at hand. If they beat the Packers this week and then beat the Detroit Lions in week 18, the Vikings will clinch the 1 seed in the NFC. So they have everything at stake. I'm expecting them to come out at full force. And with Addison's spike week upside in a must-win game, there's not many guys I would trust more for the chip. But moving on to wide receiver 20, I have Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams. And I did mention in the Puka Nacua bit that there was a little bit of context that I needed to get through with this Rams offense. But as you guys can see on the screen, this is a trend that's pointed out by Dataroma. But basically, Cooper Kupp does well when the entire Rams offense, when Matthew Stafford is playing at his best. When Matthew Stafford is struggling, Puka Nacua is usually the one that eats. Cooper Kupp is usually the one that's left behind. I mean, you can see it from the splits that I highlighted there, but very vast splits as to whether Matthew Stafford is playing well or not when it comes to Cooper Kupp's level of production. I think at this point, Puka needs to be considered the alpha of this team. Situation proof, no matter what happens on the Rams offense, you know Puka Nacua is going to be getting his. Whereas with Cooper Kupp at his age, with his injury history, I think is more of a situationally dependent option. So Cooper Kupp could very well get back on track on Saturday Night Football, but he does have a ton of risk level like we've seen in these last few weeks when Stafford has struggled. Moving on to 21, we have Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins, and despite getting a healthy amount of targets as of late, he simply has not been playing up to his own standard, and as we've seen as of late, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith have been the 2 most consistent targets in this Miami passing game, with Tyreek Hill less than 40 yards in back-to-back weeks, and he got bailed out with that touchdown reception this past week. So however, I mean, the targets are still there, 7+ targets in each of the last 4 games, and Miami cannot run the football for the life of them. We have seen Tua Tagovailoa, 34+ pass attempts in each of his last 6 starts. Wide receiver 22 is Jawan Jennings of the San Francisco 49ers, 23.25 implied Niners points. Already talked about the upside scenario for Deebo Samuel this week, who I do prefer to Jennings, but I do think that Jawan Jennings is the more consistent option on a week-to-week basis. We've seen the usage. He has 856 yards on the year. He is currently 144 yards off of hitting the 1K mark. And I do think with the Lions being a pass funnel defense, we see them try to feed their top 2 wide receivers this week. Wide receiver 23 for me was George Pickens, who did play on Christmas against the Kansas City Chiefs. Returned to action after that hamstring injury. 7 targets, 3 receptions, 50 receiving yards. 8 PPR points in that game. So unfortunate, again, I did lower him because of the matchup going up against KC this week, but we did see the Steelers' entire passing offense really flounder in that matchup. Wide receiver 24 for me this week is Jacoby Myers of the Las Vegas Raiders, 19 implied road points for the Raiders on the road to play New Orleans this week. With Jacoby Myers, again, the way he was playing earlier this year, you could even make the case it was too low. However, 2 straight down weeks, final matchup against the Saints defense. However, like I said, Jacoby Myers since week 3, 27% target share, 14.1 PPR points per game. So there is risk. It's not the greatest matchup. He has been playing bad as of late, but we do know he's the second target on this team to Brock Bowers. And like I said, you can't make up 27% of the targets. So Antonio Pierce has already said, I mean, as evidenced by last week with their win over the Jaguars, that this team wants to win and end of the year strong. And I do think that ends up being the case. We know Brock Bowers is going to get his, but outside of Brock Bowers, we got Jacoby Myers being the clear-cut number 2 option in this offense, which means in a full PPR league, I think he is a steady week-to-week top 25 level wide receiver. But moving on to wide receiver 25 this week, we have Jalen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I already mentioned his teammate with Mike Evans. Big time implied total for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against Carolina this week. And it's pretty simple for Jalen McMillan. I'll make the quick case. 57 plus yards in each of his last 3 games, 4 touchdowns in that stretch. And as we know, with Tampa Bay implied for a high total, with him being the number 2 weapon on this team, we already know that Baker Mayfield and the lot are going to throw the football. Kate Otten is already ruled out for this game. And Jalen McMillan's playing so well to the point where, like I comped him to in the pre-draft cycle, he is reminding me a ton of Jackson Smith-Njigba. We're hearing some good things from Todd Bowles already on him, and I do think at this point of the year, there's only 24 guys I would trust over him. And then next up, we have Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions, 27 implied Lions points this week. And he demotes more to a wide receiver 3 for me this week, given the tough matchup, number 2 defense against opposing wide receivers that San Francisco represents. However, we have seen some more consistency for Jameson Williams as of late. 5+ targets in 7 straight games. And of course, being tethered to a 27-point implied offense led by Ben Johnson is a great spot to be for Jameson Williams. So there is risk level. It is a tough matchup, but we know Jameson Williams, big play upside, more consistent involvement, could very well smash yet again this week, which is why I can't lower him more than this. And then next up at wide receivers 27 and 28, they also already played in that Thursday Night Football game. DJ Moore came in at 27, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 54 receiving yards, as well as 2 carries for 8 yards on the ground. 12.2 PPR points for DJ Moore. Again, not a great game, but compared to all the other guys on this slate, I think you would have taken that from that Thursday night game, especially considering JSN and the other wide receivers struggled. Speaking of struggle, I mean, DK Metcalf, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 42 receiving yards, 7.2 PPR points. Really ended the year on a sour note, and I'm very curious to see where his ADP lies going into next year. Next up at wide receiver 29 and 30. Again, I already talked about their teammate as a guy I expect to be out this week with Christian Watson. But I do think that heavily boosts the stock of both Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed in that order for me. With Dontavian Wicks, I think he's more of the upside play, whereas Jaden Reed, as we've seen, we feel more confident about his involvement in this offense. We'll just talk about it. I mean, the Vikings, very pass funnel defense, number 1 matchup for opposing wide receivers this year. And like I said, with Christian Watson being out, we know both of these guys are going to get significant playing time. We saw Dontavian Wicks earlier this year, 5 receptions, 78 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns against this same Vikings secondary. And like I said, I think this is going to be a shootout, one of the best game environments of the week, and I'm grateful that for our BBM final team, we are built around this game. Moving on to wide receiver 31, we have Darnell Mooney of the Atlanta Falcons. I talked about his teammate with Drake London, but we did see a big-time bounce-back game for Darnell Mooney this past week in Penix's debut. And like I said, with Penix's ability to throw the ball deep, I think that can only benefit Darnell Mooney moving forward. Again, excels as a deep ball thrower. We know Darnell Mooney making his hay on those big plays down the field. And with the way Kirk Cousins was playing very sheltered at the end of the season, this is a huge upgrade for Mooney. We saw it on display a little bit against the Giants, but I really do feel like he can open up that offense going on Sunday Night Football with the Atlanta Falcons backs on the wall. Wide receiver 32 for me this week is Josh Downs of the Indianapolis Colts, 24 implied Colts points on the road to play New York this week. And there is some uncertainty regarding the status of Anthony Richardson as a questionable in this game. And it is a run funnel Giants defense, but we got Josh Downs being the clear alpha wide receiver 1 for this team. Josh Downs, lead target for this team, double-digit PPR points in 8 of 12 games, and the Giants are a mess right now. They are currently in lead for the number 1 overall pick, and I don't expect much effort on the defensive end for them, especially when you contextualize that the Colts are fighting for their playoff lives. Wide receiver 33 for me this week is Khalil Shakir of the Buffalo Bills, 28 implied Bills points at home against the New York Jets this week. But Khalil Shakir, the usage has been down as of late since the bye week. However, we do have the safest projection for any offense in the league this week with over 28 implied points. And as we know, tethered to Josh Allen, very, very good spot to be. Sure, is he getting the same type of usage you saw earlier in this year? Not necessarily, but when you're talking about more of this volatile flex range, anytime you can tether yourself to Josh Allen, good spot to be in, especially considering the inconsistencies of the other Bills wide receivers, Khalil Shakir being the most consistent one. But wide receiver 34 for me this week in a big-time downgrade with the news of Jalen Hurts being out. This is where Devontae Smith finds himself. With Devontae Smith, again, he has not been that same player this year as we've seen in the past, but that's not really the reason why he's here. The reason why he's here is that Kenny Pickett is slated to start. Kenny Pickett is dealing with a rib injury, and we know A.J. Brown's already going to alpha. I mean, we saw over a 72% first-rate target share in the time that Kenny Pickett played last week. So with Devontae Smith, if Kenny Pickett is not going to be throwing the ball a ton, if when he does throw the ball, we're going to see a ton of A.J. Brown work, I do think this is an appropriate spot to have Devontae Smith off the board in the wide receiver rankings. Wide receiver 35 for me this week actually already played on Christmas as well, and the lone bright spot it almost feels like for Christmas, we have Xavier Worthy, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 79 receiving yards, did score a touchdown in the receiving game, also contributed 2 carries for 10 yards for a grand total of 22.9 PPR points. If you started Xavier Worthy with wide receiver 3 expectations, there's a very good chance he finishes as a top 5 to 8 wide receiver this week. Speaking of rookie wide receivers, we end off this video with a rookie wide receiver, and the first rookie wide receiver that was taken off the board in the NFL draft, Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it with you. We need Marvin Harrison Jr. to play better. This is really no defense for Marvin. In fact, you should have better options than Marvin Harrison Jr. this week if you are in your championship game. However, if you are stuck in a pinch and you do have to play him, you could take solace in the fact that he has 40 targets in the last 5 games, and this is a bounce back spot with a top 8 matchup on deck against the Rams. Look, he's a volatile flex play. He has shown some big spike week potential, but I can't start him over any of the top 35 guys that I have ahead of him. If you do have better options, feel free to play them in over Marv, because as of right now, he is playing like a rookie wide receiver. But either way, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below. I already talked about it in the middle portion of this video, but if you want access to our weekly rankings manifesto, they are fully free this week. Go to the link in the description. Go bookmark that tab. We will have you guys covered with a full week of rankings this week to help you guys secure that championship. And again, if you have any specific start sits, feel free to leave them in the comments section of this video. We are on the road to 60,000 subscribers. Appreciate you guys for that continued support. But with that being said, peace out. Good luck in those championship games. Secure that trophy.